The air in the grand convocation chamber was not air at all, but a shimmering, resonant medium that carried thought and sorrow with equal fidelity. It tasted of ozone and despair. At the center of the immense crystalline cavern, a holographic projection of the galaxy pulsed with a sickening, grayish wound. The wound was spreading. Kalen of the Lumina, his form a cascade of soft, internal light contained within a polished crystalline shell, felt the collective dread of the Ethelgard consortium press upon him like a physical weight. The silence, they called it, a creeping nullity that did not destroy but erased. Worlds consumed by it did not explode. They simply ceased to be their histories, their art, their very data scrubbed from the cosmic ledger, leaving behind a void that was not empty, but actively, aggressively vacant. It was a cancer of information, a blight upon existence itself. For cycles, the brightest minds of the consortium, the crystalline lumina, the silicon-based geodes, the gaseous philosophers of the Signian Veil, had bent their considerable intellects to the problem. They had built sensor arrays that could map the quantum foam and theoretical engines that could simulate the birth of universes. All had failed. The silence was not a force to be measured or an energy to be countered. It was an absence, and one could not fight nothing. The debate, which had raged for what felt like an eternity, had finally withered into a resigned hush. The great minds of the galaxy had been found wanting. The only sound was the soft, chiming hum of the chamber's own life-sustaining energies, a sound that had once been a comfort but now felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to oblivion. The beacon of unity remains unanswered. A voice, synthesized from the grinding of tectonic thought, echoed from the geode representative, Elder Pylos. Its monolithic obsidian form was unmoving, but the strain was evident in the faint, seismic tremors that rippled across its surface. We sent our plea to every known civilization, to every nascent intelligence we have ever catalogued. We offered all of our knowledge, all of our technology, in exchange for a solution, for any hope at all. The synthesized voice was flat, yet it conveyed a depth of exhaustion that Kalen felt in his own luminous core. They heard our call, the data confirms it, but no one is coming. A bitter wave of consensus washed through the chamber. They had all seen the projections. The elder races, sequestered in their guarded enclaves near the galactic core, had withdrawn their sensor nets, hoping to go unnoticed. The younger, more aggressive empires on the spiral arms had fortified their borders, treating the silence as a foreign plague they could simply quarantine. They were all wrong, of course. The silence was not a tide that stopped at borders. It was a fundamental alteration of reality itself. Their isolation was a comforting lie, a prelude to their own inevitable erasure. Kalen watched the gray stain on the star map inch forward, consuming the sector where the vibrant, avian xylos had sung their star symphonies. Now there was only static, an eternal, silent note where 1 billion years of culture had once thrived. "We were arrogant," whispered a voice like rustling nebulae from the Signian delegate, a swirling vortex of intelligent gas contained within a force field. "We believed our logic, our understanding of the cosmos was absolute. We saw the universe as a grand equation, and we were its masters. Now a variable we cannot define is unwriting the entire theorem." Kalen drifted closer to the central projection, his inner light dimming in sorrow. He remembered the activation of the beacon, the desperate final act of a civilization that had never before needed to ask for help. They had poured their entire essence into that signal, the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 species, the philosophical treatises that had defined their peaceful coexistence, the art that had brought them to tears of transcendent joy. It was the soul of the Ethelgard consortium, broadcast on every known frequency, a monument of hope, and it had been met with nothing but the cold, indifferent quiet of a galaxy that had chosen to look away. They had all concluded that no one would come. "There is one remaining contact," a junior Lumina technician reported, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. The statement hung in the resonant medium, almost an apology. "A species from the outer quadrants, a new arrival on the galactic stage. Their response to the beacon was anomalous." Pylos turned its immense form slowly, the sound of grinding stone filling the silence. "Anomalous how? Did they refuse?" "No, Elder," the technician replied, her light patterns shifting with uncertainty. "They did not refuse, they did not accept, they did not bargain. Their transmission was a collage, what their primitive systems call music, a recording of their planet's scenes, mathematical proofs of concepts we solved millennia ago, presented as if they were new discoveries, and imagery of their own species in conflict, in mourning, in celebration. It was chaotic, emotional, deeply illogical." The Cygnian delegates swirled irritably. Humans, the primates from the Sol system, we dismissed them. Their lifespan is a cosmic blink. Their technology is brutish, propelled by chemical explosions and crude fission. They are a tempest of irrational emotion, barely out of their planetary cradle. They cannot possibly comprehend the nature of the silence, let alone offer a solution. Kalen felt a strange dissonance at the dismissal. He had studied the human transmissions himself. Yes, they were chaotic. They were a cacophony of contradictions. They broadcasted their darkest wars alongside their most profound poetry. They mourned their dead with heart-wrenching sincerity and then reached for the stars with a defiant joy that was utterly alien to the placid intellectualism of the Ethelgard. The consortium saw this as a weakness, a sign of a primitive, fractured mind. But Kalen, in his most private meditations, had wondered if it was a source of some unknown strength. Their signals were not sterile data streams. They were vibrant, messy, and saturated with an undeniable will to be. "They are all we have left," Kalen said, his voice a series of soft, resonant chimes that commanded attention. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "We broadcast our logic and our knowledge, and the galaxy answered with fear and isolation. The humans answered with themselves, with their unfiltered existence. Is it not the height of illogical arrogance to dismiss the only hand offered, simply because it is shaped differently from our own?" Pylos remained silent for a long moment, the deep hum of its internal processes the only response. "And what would they send, Kalen? A fleet of their fission-powered warships to fire their projectile weapons at a conceptual void. Their might is insignificant. It would be an act of supreme futility." Before Kalen could reply, the technician flickered again, her light pulsing with sudden, sharp alarm. "Elders, a vessel has just translated from hyperspace at the designated diplomatic coordinates. It is responding to the beacon's summons." A wave of disbelief, so potent it was almost a physical shock, coursed through the chamber. After all this time, a response? The star map shifted, a new icon appearing at the edge of Ethelgard's space. It was a single, solitary point of light. The Cygnian delegate's gaseous form contracted. "A single vessel? What foolish pride is this? Does some upstart race believe one ship can stand against the end of all things? Identify them." The technician's light patterns wavered, a sign of profound confusion. "The vessel's transponder code is human." The silence that followed was heavier than any that had come before, not of resignation, but of stunned, almost insulted disbelief. The humans, the chaotic, emotional primates, had answered their call for aid against a universe-ending threat with a single, lone ship. It was not just pride. It was madness, or it was a message. Kalen felt a tremor of something he had not felt in a very long time, not hope, not yet, but a deep and unnerving curiosity. As the consortium's greatest minds stared at the solitary icon on the map, a symbol of either ultimate folly or incomprehensible confidence, they could not escape the one unifying thought that echoed in the chamber's silent dread. They had been certain no one would come, and now this inexplicable, singular, utterly human arrival. The human vessel was an aesthetic contradiction, a thing of both brutal functionality and unsettling grace. It was not large by consortium standards, a sleek obsidian dart against the vastness of space, yet it moved with a silent, predatory purpose that made the Ethelgard orbital defense platforms seem like static, primitive things. It did not request docking clearance. It simply aligned itself with the designated diplomatic spire of the Citadel, moving into a perfect orbital lock with a precision that hinted at technology far more advanced than the crude fission drives the consortium had assumed. There were no visible weapon emplacements, no ostentatious displays of power. Its very design was an enigma of quiet minimalism, a stark contrast to the loud, chaotic signals their species constantly broadcasted. Inside the grand convocation chamber, the tension was a suffocating presence. The elders had agreed to receive the human envoy, more out of a morbid curiosity than any real expectation of aid. The single ship was seen as a profound insult by some, a tragic misunderstanding by others. Kalen, however, reserved his judgment. The vessel's unassuming form and unnervingly precise movements suggested a level of control and intentionality that did not align with the consortium's profile of humanity as a species. Driven by impulsive emotion, there was a discipline there, a silent, powerful confidence that was deeply unnerving. The great portal at the far end of the chamber irised open, not with the usual silent grace of Ethelgard technology, but with a low, resonant hum that seemed to ground the very air. A single figure emerged. It was bipedal, encased in a form-fitting suit of a material that did not reflect light so much as drink it in, a void black that made its silhouette stark against the chamber's inner luminescence. The being's head was covered by a helmet of the same material, its faceplate a smooth, opaque curve. It walked with a steady, measured gait, each footfall on the crystalline floor making a soft, deliberate sound that seemed to count the seconds of their dying universe. The being stopped before the convocation, its posture one of perfect stillness. It was small, fragile-looking compared to the monolithic form of Pylos or the swirling expanse of the Signian delegate. Yet it commanded the space. The opaque faceplate retracted with a faint hiss, revealing the face within. It was a female of the human species, her features pale, her hair dark and severe. Her expression was utterly neutral, a mask of calm professionalism that was more unsettling than any display of aggression could have been. Her eyes, a dark, piercing gray, swept across the assembled elders, acknowledging each of them with a slow, deliberate gaze that felt as if it were not merely seeing them, but analyzing them on a fundamental level. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova, representing the unified peoples of Earth," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and unaccented, translated perfectly into the consortium's resonant medium by some unseen technology. There was no tremor of fear, no hint of arrogance. It was the voice of someone reporting a verifiable fact. "We received your beacon of unity. We have come to offer assistance." Pylos' synthesized voice boomed, laced with an undisguised skepticism. "Ambassador, your species has sent a single vessel and a single representative to confront a cataclysm that has baffled the combined intellect of 1,000 worlds. Are we to interpret this as a gesture of profound disrespect or a terminal lack of understanding?" Rostova's gaze settled on the geode elder. Her expression did not change. "Neither, Elder Pylos. We interpret your situation with the gravity it deserves. We have sent precisely what is required." The sheer, unadulterated confidence of the statement sent a ripple of disbelief through the chamber. Kalen felt his own light flicker, a mixture of awe and incredulity. This was not the chaotic, emotional primate he had read about in the intelligence briefings. This was something else entirely. This was a being of immense, almost absolute, self-possession. "What is required?" The Signian delegate swirled, its voice a hiss of agitated gas. "What can one ship, one mind, possibly do against the silence? It is a null state, a conceptual negation. It cannot be fought. It can only be erased by." "That is because you perceive it as an absence," Rostova replied, her tone patient, as if explaining a simple principle to a child. "Your sensors search for energy, for matter, for information. They find nothing, and so you conclude there is nothing there. You are attempting to measure a whole with a solid ruler. You have mistaken the nature of the problem." She raised a hand, and a device on her wrist cast a new holographic projection into the center of the room, superseding the consortium's own grim star map. At first it looked identical, the galaxy with the spreading gray stain of the silence. But then Rostova made a gesture, and the projection zoomed in, not on a star or a planet, but on the silence itself. The gray void resolved into an impossibly complex crystalline lattice, a fractal structure of shimmering, negative space. It was not empty. It was a perfectly ordered architecture of non-existence. A collective gasp, a chorus of psychic shock, echoed through the chamber. The Lumina, the Geodes, the Signians, all of them whose technology could peer into the heart of a singularity, had never seen this. Their instruments had registered only a flat, featureless void. What is this?" Kalen chimed, his own form pulsing with a brilliant, uncontrolled flash of astonishment. "How are you able to see this? Our deepest quantum sensors show nothing." "Your sensors are designed to detect the presence of things," Rostova explained, her eyes fixed on the terrifyingly beautiful lattice. "Ours are designed to detect their absence. We learn to do so out of necessity. Human consciousness is a complex and often contradictory thing. We experience doubt, loss, sorrow, concepts that are in their essence defined by an absence. To understand ourselves, we had to develop a science of nothingness. We had to learn to map the shape of a void." She turned her calm, gray eyes back to the council. "The silence is not a force or an entity. It is an artifact, a signal of such immense complexity that it registers as a total absence of information to any system not specifically calibrated to its structure. It is not erasing you. It is rewriting you into its own language, a language of perfect, ordered nullity. Your cultures, your histories, your very consciousness are being translated into a state of absolute zero." The philosophical weight of her words was staggering. They were not being destroyed. They were being converted. transformed into a part of this silent, crystalline architecture. The revelation was 1,000 times more terrifying than simple annihilation. Pylos's form trembled. Even if this is true, what can be done? How can one fight a language? How can you, a single mind, hope to counter a signal that is consuming the galaxy? And here, for the first time, the faintest hint of something, not a smile, but a deep, profound sense of purpose, touched the edge of Ambassador Rostova's expression. You are correct, Elder. A single mind cannot. Even the combined minds of your great consortium cannot. But you have made another incorrect assumption. Her gray eyes seemed to look past them all, into a space beyond the chamber, beyond the citadel, beyond the stars themselves. You assume I have come alone. The statement hung in the air, a perfect, insoluble riddle. Kalen looked at the lone human, the single ship, and the vast, empty space around them. There was no one else. The fleet logs were clear. The tactical displays showed nothing but their own defense platforms, yet the ambassador's certainty was absolute, a fundamental truth spoken with the weight of an entire reality behind it. He felt the first true glimmer of something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The humans were not chaotic primitives. They were a mystery deeper and more vast than the silence itself. And their mightiest force, the thing they believed was sufficient to face the end of the universe, was not a weapon or a fleet. It was something else. Something the Ethelgard Consortium, in all their logical brilliance, could not even begin to comprehend. The Grand Convocation Chamber, for all its crystalline splendor, felt small and fragile in the wake of the ambassador's declaration. The elders of the Consortium, beings who had debated the ethics of stellar engineering and the nature of time itself, were reduced to a state of profound, childlike confusion. They looked at Rostova, a single, soft-bodied organism, and tried to reconcile her solitary presence with her claim of not being alone. Their logic, the bedrock of their civilization, offered no solution. "Explain yourself, Ambassador," Pylos's voice ground out, the sound of mountains being crushed to dust. "Our sensors are absolute. There is no one else here. Deception in this chamber is unwise." Rostova's gaze remained unwavering. She did not seem offended by the accusation. She seemed to expect it. "Your sensors detect physical forms, energy signatures, conventional modes of communication. The force that accompanies me is not something you can detect because it is not separate from me. It is a part of me as I am a part of it. It is the totality of my species." She gestured again to the holographic display. The terrifying lattice of the silence remained, but now a new element appeared. It was a faint, golden light, a web of interconnected points that pulsed in unison. It overlaid the entire map of the galaxy, a network of impossible scale and complexity, with a dense, brilliant knot of it centered on the Sol system. "For much of our history," Rostova began, her voice taking on the quality of a lecturer explaining a fundamental law of the universe, "humanity was a fractured, chaotic species. We were defined by our individuality, our conflicts, our separate wills. We built empires and we tore them down. We created works of breathtaking beauty and committed acts of unspeakable horror. We were, as your archives suggest, a storm of contradiction. But through it all, one constant remained, a desire to connect." She walked slowly around the projection, her dark form casting a stark shadow against its light. "We built networks, first of wires, then of light, then of subspace. We shared our thoughts, our art, our science, our pain. Our technology and our biology began to merge. We developed neural interfaces, then quantum-entangled consciousness links. We did not set out to build a hive mind. We cherish our individuality. But we sought a deeper empathy, a more profound understanding of one another. We sought to build a choir where every voice could be heard in perfect harmony." Her eyes met Kalen's. In their gray depths, he saw not the mind of a single being, but the placid, deep ocean of a billion souls, a trillion experiences, all unified in a single, coherent will. "We call it the chorus," she said softly. "Every human is a part of it, a voluntary, conscious union. I am not Eva Rostova, an individual. I am Eva Rostova, a focal point for the human chorus. When I speak with the combined knowledge and experience of my entire species. When I perceive, I do so with the sensory input of trillions of souls across thousands of worlds. I am not alone here. Humanity is here." The revelation was not a sudden shock, but a slow, dawning horror and awe that settled over the chamber like a shroud. The Ethelgard valued individual intellect above all else. The idea of surrendering even a fraction of one's consciousness was anathema, a philosophical nightmare. Yet the humans had not surrendered it. They had shared it. They had taken their greatest weakness, their chaotic, emotional, conflicting individuality and woven it into their greatest strength. They had not suppressed their nature, they had harmonized it. "This chorus," Kalen chimed, his voice trembling with the enormity of the concept. "It is this that allows you to perceive the silence." "Precisely," Rostova confirmed. "The silence is a monolithic, coherent signal of null information. A single mind, or even a collection of individual minds like your consortium, perceives it as overwhelming static. But the chorus can perceive its structure. We can feel the gaps in its logic, the resonant frequencies of its existence. It is a song of uncreation, and we can learn its notes." She turned back to the assembled elders, her quiet confidence now seeming less like arrogance and more like a simple statement of fact. "We do not intend to fight the silence with weapons. You cannot shoot a concept. We will not attempt to outthink it with logic. Its logic is perfect in its own sterile way. Instead, we will do what our species has always done when faced with the incomprehensible. We will communicate with it." The Cygnian delegates swirled in a vortex of agitated disbelief. "Communicate with it? It is not a being. It is a phenomenon. You speak madness." "Is a star a being?" Rostova countered, her voice calm and level. "Yet you have learned to understand its language of fusion and gravity. The silence is no different. It has a structure, a purpose, a syntax. It is simply a form of existence your philosophies have not yet accounted for. We will introduce a new variable into its equation. We will not broadcast logic or data. We will broadcast a signal of our own." She raised her hand, and the lone human ship, orbiting silently above the citadel, began to emit a soft, golden glow. It was not the harsh light of a weapon charging, but the warm, gentle luminescence of a dawn. "We will broadcast the human chorus itself," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "We will introduce it to the concept of grief, of hope, of defiant joy in the face of despair, of love that persists beyond death. We will introduce it to the illogical, chaotic, beautiful symphony of life. We will sing a song so complex, so full of contradiction and meaning, that the silence's perfect, simple logic will be unable to compute it. We will not destroy it. We will give it something to think about." The plan was so utterly, profoundly human that Kalen felt a wave of vertigo. The consortium had brought equations, sensor readings, and tactical doctrines to bear against the apocalypse. The humans had brought poetry. They had brought art. They had brought the totality of their shared, messy, emotional experience as their ultimate weapon. It was the most insane strategy he had ever heard, and it was the first thing that had given him any sense of hope. "And what do you ask of us?" Pylos rumbled, its earlier skepticism now replaced by a deep, resonant uncertainty. "What is the price for this assistance?" Rostova looked at the ancient geode, and for the first time her expression softened, revealing a glimpse of the vast, empathetic ocean behind her eyes. "There is no price. The chorus feels your fear. It feels the memory of the Xylos' fading star symphonies. It feels the impending loss of your histories, your philosophies. To a species built on shared experience, the erasure of another's experience is a wound upon ourselves. We are not here for payment or for glory. We are here because we must be. We are here because you called, and we heard you." She turned back to the projection of the silence, her hands clasped behind her back. "All we ask is that you watch and learn. There are more things in this universe than your logic has dreamt of." With that, the golden glow from her vessel intensified, and a wave of something, not energy, not sound, but something else entirely, a feeling, a concept, began to emanate from the ship. It washed over the citadel, through the chamber, and into the very heart of Kalen's crystalline form. It was a feeling of a billion lullabies being sung at once, the taste of a first rainfall on a dry world, the sharp, aching beauty of a forgotten memory, the defiant roar of a parent protecting their child. It was the undilute, unshielded, overwhelming essence of humanity, broadcast as a single, coherent wave of pure meaning, and it was heading directly for the silent, gray heart of the void. The chamber became a silent sanctuary of observation. The elders of the Ethelgard Consortium, beings of immense power and intellect, could do nothing but bear witness. The human single vessel had become a star, a golden beacon pouring a torrent of raw, conceptual data into the void. Through the link ambassador Rostova had established, they could feel a shadow of what the chorus was broadcasting. It was not a weaponized data stream. It was a deluge of lived experience. Kalen felt it as a symphony of sensation and memory that was utterly alien. He experienced the terror and valor of a soldier on a forgotten battlefield, the quiet satisfaction of a scientist solving an elegant proof, the fierce, irrational love of a mother for her newborn child. He felt the collective sorrow of a species that knew loss intimately, a species whose every member was acutely aware of their own mortality. And yet threaded through the sorrow was a strain of hope so potent, so stubbornly persistent, that it defied all logic. It was the feeling of planting a tree whose shade you would never enjoy, the act of creating art that would outlive you, the choice to be kind in a universe that was often cruel. It was a broadcast of millions of years of human struggle and triumph, compressed into a single, overwhelming wave of empathy. On the holographic map, the effect was immediate and profound. Where the golden wave of the chorus met the crystalline lattice of the silence, a reaction occurred. It was not an explosion, it was a transformation. The perfect, sterile geometry of the null structure began to fracture, not into chaos, but into new, more complex patterns. The gray of the void was infused with color, with light. The silence, which had only ever erased, was now being forced to create. The monolithic, singular note of its existence was being shattered into a billion different harmonics. It was like watching a frozen ocean melt, crack, and give way to the vibrant, teeming life beneath. "It's working," the Cygnian delegate whispered, its gaseous form swirling with patterns of pure astonishment. "The null field is destabilizing. It cannot process the contradictions." "It is not a matter of processing," Rostova said, her voice a quiet anchor in the storm of sensation. "It is a matter of resonance. The silence is a system in a state of perfect, low-energy order, a crystal. Life is a system of chaotic, high-energy complexity. We are introducing a resonant frequency that its structure cannot sustain. We are, in a sense, singing a note that shatters the glass." For what felt like cycles, they watched as the golden light of the human chorus pushed back the gray tide. Star systems that had been on the brink of erasure were now bathed in the warm, conceptual glow. The spreading wound on the galaxy began to shrink, to recede, its perfect edges fraying and dissolving into vibrant, chaotic nebulae of nascent information. The Ethelgard had tried to fight the void with logic. The humans were filling it with soul. Kalen felt a profound sense of humility. His own people, the Lumina, had achieved a form of immortality by shedding their physical bodies, by becoming beings of pure, ordered light and intellect. They had seen humanity's short, messy lives as a flaw, a primitive stage to be overcome. Now he saw the truth. It was in that very fragility, that finite existence, that humanity had found its transcendent strength. Their art, their love, their sacrifice, it all held meaning precisely because their time was short. They burned so brightly because they knew the darkness was coming. Their chorus was not just a technological marvel. It was the ultimate expression of a species that had learned to treasure every fleeting moment of existence. As the last vestiges of the silence in their quadrant dissolved, a new phenomenon occurred. The process did not simply stop. The energy of the destabilized null field, combined with the focused intent of the human chorus, did not dissipate into nothing. It coalesced. At the very heart of where the silence had been most concentrated, a point of light appeared, a light of impossible brilliance and purity. It expanded rapidly, not as a destructive explosion, but as a blossoming, a fundamental reordering of space-time. "What is happening?" Pylos' voice rumbled, a tremor of primordial fear in its tone. "What have you unleashed?" Rostova's calm expression finally broke, replaced by one of genuine, unadulterated awe. Her gray eyes were wide, fixed on the unfolding spectacle. "This is unexpected. The null field was not just an artifact, it was a shell, a containment vessel." The blossoming light resolved itself into a stable, breathtaking structure. It was a gateway, a rift in the fabric of reality, impossibly vast, large enough to swallow Nebu. Lee-Hole, it shimmered with colors the Ethelgard had never seen, and from its depths something reached out. It was not a fleet, it was not a being, it was a signal. But it was unlike any signal they had ever encountered. It was not electromagnetic, not gravitational, not psychic. It was a wave of pure, distilled intelligence, a message that imprinted itself directly onto the consciousness of every sentient being in the galaxy. The message was simple, yet its implications were so vast they shattered every conception of the universe the Ethelgard had ever held. "It has been long. The test is complete. The lockdown is lifted. For those who have learned to sing the song of unity, the path is now open." Kalen staggered back, his crystalline form resonating with the sheer power of the message. The silence. It hadn't been a plague or a weapon. It had been a lock, a quarantine, a galactic test put in place by a power so ancient and so advanced that it was indistinguishable from a law of nature. It had been designed to contain developing civilizations, to see which of them could overcome the ultimate existential threat. Not an external enemy, but the sterile perfection of absolute order, of ultimate apathy. It was a test to see who could discover the answer was not to fight the silence, but to fill it. The precursors, the Cygnian delegate whispered, its form shrinking as if in the presence of a god. The legends were true, a civilization that seeded the galaxy and then vanished. They did not vanish, they went beyond, and they left this gatekeeper behind. Rostova was silent for a long time, her face pale, her human mind, even amplified by the chorus, struggling to encompass the scale of the revelation. The problem they had come to solve was merely the final question on an examination they didn't even know they were taking. And humanity, the young, chaotic, emotional upstarts, had just provided the answer for the entire galaxy. They thought no one would come, Kalen said, the words chiming with a newfound clarity. He was not speaking of the consortium's unanswered plea anymore. He was speaking of the precursors, of the long, silent eons they had waited, watching to see if any of their children would evolve beyond conflict and isolation. They set a challenge that could only be solved not by the mightiest fleet or the sharpest mind, but by the most unified heart. He drifted towards Ambassador Rostova, the light of his form soft and filled with a respect that transcended diplomacy. He saw her now not as an alien, not as a human, but as a kindred spirit, a representative of the species that had unlocked their shared future. The immediate threat was gone, but a new, infinitely larger reality had been unveiled. Beyond the gateway lay a new frontier, a universe of possibilities that the Ethelgard, in their isolated wisdom, could never have reached alone. Your chorus, your unity, it was the key, Kalen continued, his voice resonating with emotion. We sought to preserve our individual knowledge. You sought to share your collective experience. In the end, that was the only answer that mattered. Rostova finally turned from the image of the gateway, her eyes meeting his. The vast ocean of the chorus was still there, but now he could also see the individual soul,